How are you doing, friends and relatives and everyone? Yeah, you people are relatives. African American, Black Americans, African diaspora, Africans all over the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love you guys. And today, we have a very hot guest with us. He's yet to join and he's from Tanzania. He's going to share with us Black Lives experience in Tanzania. See, you've been asking about having a one-on-one conversation with an African American to hear from them so that you can also listen. Myself, I'm not an African American, I am an African, but there's always something you can learn from this channel. So prepare any questions you might have for the brother so that we might be able to help ourselves and get to learn things about African diaspora. And also, the other live stream, the previous live stream I did, I welcomed our brother Mark from Africa. He also lives in Tanzania, and it went well. The interview went well, and we loved it. So guys, just hold on, just hold on. Our guest is about to come. Uh, let me check in the computer. Give me a minute, okay? So here we are. So kindly join, give the live stream a like. We are here waiting for our guest. I would say that if you have any questions, please prepare the questions because this is going to be very, very impactful. This is going to be very, very important. If you have any questions that you'd love to ask a fellow African American in Africa, this is the opportunity. Yes, I'll be able to address all your, we will be able to address all your questions where we can. So just tell us your questions. That's it. Moving to Africa is something which is mandatory to African Americans. Yeah, it's mandatory because here is where you came from. And it's really, really important that you come back to the motherland. It's really important that you come back to the motherland and get to discover how it is. Yes, yes, yes. So for those who have the patience, I'll tell you, you will reap the benefits, and it will be so good. It will be interesting. It will be good. Mm. Just give me a minute as I engage the guest. Yeah. So let's hold on for a minute as we wait for our brother to join. Yeah. Just hold on for a minute. We're almost there. So, meanwhile, if you have questions, do share your questions. Do share your questions. We are going to talk about African diaspora real life experience in Tanzania. Tanzania is one of the countries that African Americans have chosen to come to, and we have greater numbers of African Americans in this East African country. the major town, the major country in Africa where African Americans dwell at is Ghana. We have Tanzania, which is second. We have Gambia. We have Kenya. We have Sierra Leone. We have Nigeria. Yeah, but Nigeria is not as much. I don't know why. So having to listen from brother, we are going to so much learn a lot. I'll just tell you that hold on, hold on. Yes, just hold on. Yeah, Stephen Watt is saying we also have black people in UK. It's very true. Black people exist all over the world. I cannot deny the fact that we have black people in UK as well. I can't deny that fact. Here is our guest. So let's start. How are you? How are
Can you
you?
hear me now?
How are
Yeah,
you
man, I'm
doing?
all right.
Yes, yes.
I'm just easy, man. I'm okay. How are you?
Uh-huh. I'm fine.
Finally,
I
finally,
have seen
man.
your I have seen your face very, very many times.
Oh, really? Me?
Yes.
When I think I was under the radar.
No, you ain't, bro. I saw you.
I'm a low-key private kind of guy.
I I saw you in Mark from Africa. I saw
That's
you at
true.
Swahili Nation. You were there, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yes,
Ah,
I've seen you.
you know.
I've also seen you on some WhatsApp status. Yes, here in Kenya. Yes,
Oh,
WhatsApp status.
oh, what's up, me? Oh,
Yes.
um, you know, it's not like I like the camera or attention or being on YouTube program. So in every instance I was invited, just, after talking about issues as a diasporan who has returned back to the motherland, after conversations, I would be, asked to, as other people would, be asked to weigh in on these questions of relocation, returning to Africa, cultural differences, how to cope, and what have you. And so um, I consider it a privilege and perhaps an opportunity to share thoughts and insights that might help others who are considering relocation, relocating back home to Africa. If you notice, I use the term return, relocate back home, even though we've been separated from the continent, most of us for two, three, and 400 years.
Mhm. All
So,
right, right, right.
um, so yes, I don't know. It's your program. As I tell
Mm,
Mika Chavala at Swahili Nation, it's your program. So you set the tone and the pace and the tenor, and I
mm,
will just contribute my thoughts as questions arise. And
mm,
because I know myself, depending on the topic,
mm.
if I get too deep into it, you might end up getting a strike from YouTube. And, I don't want that. So I like to just follow your lead.
Mm. And you'll be able to answer them according to how you see it, right?
Yes.
In this channel, as long as we are saying things that is not targeting specific people, things that will harm specific people, because YouTube might be very, very serious according to, we have a group of people, we have a certain religion promoting hate speech. That is what YouTube hates. But
Right.
sharing our opinions on Africans, African Americans, I don't find no problem. I've gone through YouTube community guidelines. I've gone through them this past week, even the day before yesterday, the day after
Okay.
yesterday. I was through that, and you need not to worry about that.
Okay. All right.
After all, the message is more important than YouTube.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mm.
Fair enough.
So
All right.
I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask you this. As an African American, what motivated you to move to Tanzania? And how has been your experience in Tanzania so far?
Okay. So I want to answer the question, but I think it's
Mm.
important that I first identify who I am, because simply saying as an African American will not do justice to uh, uh, to me and possibly to many others, because there's some of us who don't fit into uh, that space perfectly. So why am I saying that?
Mm.
I'm saying that I am from the Americas, which includes North America. The Americas include Central America. The Americas include South America, and then which are a chain of islands that run parallel, sort of, to Central America, starting from Cuba, which is 90 miles to the southeast of Florida,
Mm.
and then those islands go all the way down to Trinidad and Tobago, 90, if I remember correctly, miles off Venezuela, which is in South America.
Mm.
So my family has been, on my father's side, in the Americas for some of my ancestors since the 1759, and then
Mm.
others along the way from Africa, um, coming in as late as 1839. So that's my father's side. On my mother's side, she is African American from the North
Mm.
America. Uh, her people are originally from.
Mm.
So, as is the case with many in the Caribbean, our ancestry is oftentimes mixed between different islands in the Caribbean.
Mm.
Of course, uh, almost all of us originally from Africa, but
Mm.
settled in different parts of the Caribbean. And in some cases, in quite a few cases, there's been some admixture with Europeans. Of course, some consensual, uh, post-slavery, some during slavery, which was not consensual. As you know, the slave trade was a very brutal, um, inhumane, and oppressive
Activity.
uh,
Mm.
activity for we as African descendants,
Mm.
particularly women in many
Mm.
instances. So I am African American from the standpoint of um, being from the Americas. Also, I was born in New York, but my family,
Mm.
my father's side, are from the Caribbean, or what is
Mm.
passed on. And again, my mother is from New York, but parents from North Carolina. So
Yeah.
that's my background. Now, some people, I have to say this, I don't like to, I don't feel I should have to, but I have to because it comes up. And it's an unfortunate thing. So many people on the continent, and even some of my brothers and sisters from North America in particular, um, would look at me, my, my complexion of my skin, and they would assume that I
Mm.
am a white man. I've been called that.
Yeah.
And you know, in Africa, once your skin is light skinned, people say you're white. You can even be
Mm.
darker than me, say you're white. But we even have colorism among ourselves, uh, unfortunately. So why am I this color? I have to say this because in Tanzania, it's a particular problem in Tanzania with this problem I'm going
Mm.
to describe. So I have a form of albinism. I'm an African, but I'm what people would say an albino, an African albino. And so that explains why particular skin tone is the color that it is. And, uh, so even though I have some European ancestry, I actually
Mm.
have this condition from my mother, my African American mother, who had is a carrier for what is called an X-linked form of albinism. X meaning the X chromosome. I inherited that condition from my African American mother. That's the irony in the whole thing. Not my father who has mixed ancestry. All right. So
Mm.
now that I've gotten that out of the way, let me say emphatically, let me say clearly, and let me say with um, clarity, I am an African. I don't just identify as an African because I want to be one. I'm an
Mm.
African
Mm.
genetically and in my mindset, even though I grew up in the Caribbean. And so, having grown up, born in New York City, but raised from a baby at 13 months old until adulthood, I grew up in what is used to be called the Danish West Indies, which is now called the United States Virgin Islands.
Mm.
Incidentally, the United States Virgin Islands are by many people by the individual islands that make up that group of islands. St.
Mm.
Thomas, Virgin Islands,
Mm.
where I grew up, St. John, Virgin Islands, where my grandmother on my father's side is from, and St.
Mm.
Croix, all right, or the Spanish is Santa Cruz, but St. Croix, which is where my grandfather on my father's side is from. And my name is Anthony Whitehead, and I go by my full name, which includes my African my father, my father's father, and my father's mother.
Sorry about the
So
connection.
Anthony,
I had some problems with my connection.
there's an echo. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the echo.
Can you hear an echo?
I can hear an echo. I can hear you, but I hear an echo when I speak.
Okay, let me.
So maybe you have a speaker on or something. I don't know. Oh, that's better. So I go by Anthony Sowa Akai Whitehead. Sowa is the surname for my grandmother. It's a Ga name from the Ga tribe of Ghana. Uh, some of the families in the Danish West, now U.S. Virgin Islands, um, some of them were able to retain their original African surnames. All right. And on my father's side from St. Croix, my great great grandmother's name was Camille Akai, aka I, also a Ga name because of the strong connection that existed and still exists between Ghana and the former Danish West Indies, now U.S. Virgin Islands. So I grew up in this culture, and I was raised, my brother and I were raised by what we call a griot. I don't know if that term is used in the eastern part of Africa or East Africa, but a griot from the western central part of Africa is someone who is a culture bearer, someone who has learned um, herbalism, how to treat diseases and sickness using herbs. I'm not saying that they were involved necessarily in the esoteric or the spiritual dimension of it, uh, but my mother was an herbalist, and she also raised us, um, sharing with us what we call Anansi stories. Who Anansi? That's, I don't know if it exists here in East Africa, but in West Africa, it's folklore centered around the main character, which is a spider, and he's known for being crafty and always trying to deceive people and taking advantage of them. And in these stories, you learn how, certain values about honesty and integrity and respect from stories surrounding Anansi. So I grew up in a very Afrocentric way, except we thought it was our culture. We didn't realize it came from Africa, right? And so, to get to the heart of your question, what it feels like or what it's like as an African American living now in Tanzania or in Africa, um, for me, it's not difficult. The adjustment hasn't been difficult. My wife is from Grenada, which is another country in the Caribbean. Same thing. Our children, we can relate in so many ways African culture, even though each country and tribe have their own unique cultural practices, there is still a lot of things in common in Africa, among Africans, and believe it or not, in common with people in the Caribbean. Now, I have lived in the United States. When I became an adult, um, we lived in the United States mainland, we call it, for what, just about 13 years in Georgia. And so we lived, of course, um, uh, in a part of in the suburbs, but in a place where there was not only whites, but there were, of course, people of different races, predominantly African American. And yeah, it was, you were fine with it. The retention, the cultural retention in the U.S. mainland is a little bit different than the Caribbean. That's not to say that there isn't African cultural retention in and among us. No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is because African Americans in the U.S. mainland are the minority, and in the case of the Caribbean, Africans in the Caribbean are the majority. Quite naturally, the dynamic of cultural African cultural retention will be different. What is happening today now, I mean, however, is we in the Caribbean, we are beginning to acknowledge that what we thought was our culture that we came up with is actually African. And more younger people are starting to identify with their African identity. All right. In the US mainland, more and more
Can
more
I
and
ask you
more
something?
African Americans. Yes. Yes.
Let me ask you a question. We have
Yes.
you've said that you're discovering those cultures in the Caribbean. I'm not Caribbean, but African. You borrowed me
Okay,
from the
you're
Africans.
echoing.
Oh, okay. So could you what could you say about those African Americans, or rather Black Americans, as they choose to be called, they don't want to be called African Americans. What would you say to such
Okay,
people?
so we're gonna get to that. I know because that's an issue because I'm saying right now, right now there is an awakening taking place. There is an awareness, an increasing awareness, and an acknowledgement, not just in the Caribbean, but in the U.S. mainland, by African descendants or descendants of persons who were enslaved, who originated from Africa. There is an increasing awareness and identification with our African roots. And this is taking place in the US as well as the Caribbean. I'm saying to you that even though we retain the culture in the Caribbean, it's only now we are beginning to understand, at least most of us, more of us, that actually what we thought was quote unquote Caribbean culture is in fact African. And we are beginning to realize that a lot of our culture that's African, it's in fact African, and we are accepting it as such. To the extent that it's the majority of the people, I would say no. But I'm saying there's an increasing awareness. But the same thing is happening in the US mainland. More and more of my African American brothers and sisters are coming to realization that not only are we Africans and and want to learn more about our roots, more open to traveling to the continent to visit, more open to traveling to the relocating to the continent. Um, we feel we understand that we are also coming to the realization that they're not only Africans. Now, this is part that you may or may not, or some in your audience um, may or may not find interesting. It can be controversial. Not only are we discovering, we in the diaspora, that we are that our motherland is where we belong, right? Because many of us want to stay in America or the Caribbean. We don't have any. Many of us don't have any intention of leaving the Caribbean or America to go to Africa for all the things that we were told, all the propaganda, all the news reports, the negative narratives. But we are there's this shift towards the acceptance, the embrace of our motherland and the desire to return. But in addition to that, we have discovered that we are not only Africans, but we are actually the descendants of Israel or Jacob. And it's considered very controversial, but I think we have to include this part that I'm sharing with you now as part of this discussion for all of us to have. I'm talking about our brothers and sisters on the continent and those who might be listening who are not even African, so that we can understand what's really driving the return to Africa. It's not only that we are identifying as Africans because we are, or we are embracing our motherland, or we are accepting our identity as Africans, but what we are increasingly, the majority of us who are returning to Africa, are acknowledging and have come to terms with, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that we are actually the children of Israel. And you see, this is the part of the conversation that if we go too far, you might get a strike. Because I know if I start to drop uh, certain facts and speak with passion about it, it can raise a lot of controversy. And so, this, what seems to be a sudden and growing interest and migration of African Americans, Afro Caribbean people, Afro European people, you know, to the motherland is largely driven by an understanding that we are Africans, but we are Africans that are descendants of Shem, specifically the bloodline of Jacob, who is also called Israel. All right. So I think I want to stop there. I think I've given you quite a bit of material to to ask questions about or make comments about.
All right, let me ask you. I think you've answered some parts of this. The next question, which is, how do you find the cultural differences between the United
Okay,
States and
cultural
Tanzania?
differences.
And have
Okay,
there been any
between
challenges?
Tanzania and where?
USA and the Caribbean. So
And the Caribbean. Okay. Well,
let's include the Caribbean. Let's include and USA
of
also.
course, the United States,
Yeah.
yeah, Latin America, because uh, we were dispersed at least to the Atlantic uh, slave trade. We were dispersed mostly to what is called the Americas. And then, and uh, it is said that up to 80% of the enslaved Africans that arrived in the what it was called the New World or the Americas came through uh, mostly through Ghana and other West African slave ports, you know. And so, but then we have the slave trade, the East African slave trade. Some people call it the Arab slave trade. Um, and we had uh, enslaved Africans, Bantus, dispersed throughout the what is now called the Middle East, or actually Northeast Africa. That's what it really is, um, and other destinations in Asia. All right. Now, I say that because most of us, it is said, that 95 plus percent of us in the diaspora in the Americas are actually were actually arrived through the Atlantic slave trade from West Africa and Central East Africa, Central Africa, the Congo, Angola, Gabon, all the way across to Senegal. How can you see your notice? You only been to Tanzania. Well, actually, 20 plus years ago, I spent some time in West Africa. My journey started back then to my understanding about myself now. And so I can see differences and similarities between West Africans and East Africans, all right, because of my exposure and my experience in Ghana and Liberia and Sierra Leone. Um, and so let's talk about similarities and let's talk about the nuances and the differences. So in Tanzania, you have, and in Kenya, you have something called ugali, uh, white corn, um, uh, made into a sort of a meal. In the U.S. Virgin Islands or Danish West Indies, we use yellow corn to make what we call fungi. But in Ghana, that same yellow corn, uh, fufu. But then you have different kinds of fufu. You have cassava, you have um, rice fufu, you have different kinds of fufu. But it's the same concept and almost the same or very similar ways of preparing it. All right. Um, in Ghana, you have kutumri, but in the Caribbean, we call that kalalu. It's a mixture of of green leaves, green leafy vegetables, um, okra, different kinds of meat, and what have you. It's like a stew. In New Orleans and Louisiana, you call that it's similar. It's very similar. You call it gumbo, right? In Tanzania, you have something called pilau. I think it's the same thing in Kenya. I'm not sure. Pilau, which is rice with, you know, mixed with or cooked with a number of other ingredients, peas and carrots and what have you. Um, in Grenada, they call it pilau. Trinidad, they call it pilau. In Tanzania, they call it the same thing, same food, pilau. It makes you wonder about that notion that 90+% of our people came from West Africa. I have a sneaking suspicion that some of them came from East Africa as well, but that's just a suspicion. Um, in the United States, um, what ugali here is called, oh gosh, I can't remember, but I know they have the same thing. So in the area of food, in the Department of Food, we have similarities that actually um, originate from Africa, in my opinion, and we brought with us to the U.S. We brought with us to the Caribbean and Latin America. You go to the Dominican Republic. I lived 9 years. My wife and I and two younger daughters lived 9 years in the Dominican Republic. And even though they speak Spanish um, and they have Latin ancestry, 70% of the people are actually mixed with Africans, West Africans. And the food is very similar. Different name, slightly different ways of preparation, but the same food. So that's a similar. Music, let's talk about music. In East Africa, in Central Africa, in South Africa, in West Africa, um, the musical style of singing is called call and response. The lead singer says something, and the people singing backup, what we call backup, they answer, they respond to what the lead singer says. That is an African form of music. That's not what you would find in Europe. That's actually African style of music. Um, the whole idea that we have in America, where singers would use what we call riffs in their music. You know, when you hear gospel singers sing, and they said, um, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home, sweet. I don't know how to do it, but they do all those riffs, right? Those changes. That's African. We see reminiscences of that when Muslims do their call to prayer in Arabic. You hear it in some of the music in Nigeria, even in Ghana. Um, the music is similar. Different beats, sometimes the exact same beats. You go to Equatorial Guinea and you will hear the same beat and style of music there that you would hear in Cuba or in Puerto Rico or in the Dominican Republic. All right. You go to Haiti or Haiti, you listen to their music, and the music is very similar to the music in Congo and Angola. So music, there's retention. So we fit in as Caribbean people and as African Americans, and we have to acknowledge this, of all the diasporans, African diasporans, the diasporans who have contributed most to the awakening that we are seeing now are African Americans. The civil rights struggle, the struggle during Jim Crow, the Black Wall Street and other successful entrepreneurial projects initiated right after emancipation. All of that, all of those accomplishments and efforts and initiatives originated in America, and we are all the beneficiaries of that. Not to mention the many inventions that built America were actually inventions by diasporans, African American diasporans. And so um, the whole idea of resilience, Africans are resilient, we in the Caribbean are resilient, African Americans are resilient. So those are the similarities. Now let's talk about the differences, unless you have another question. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. I
Just to
can't hear.
continue,
Okay, I can hear you. Okay, I can hear you now.
just to continue,
Okay,
I will tell you after, I will ask you after you're done. Tell me
okay, good.
the differences
Okay,
between the
so,
cultures in Tanzania and the cultures
okay,
in
sure.
USA and Caribbean. Mm.
Sure, sure. Okay. So, and I want to say this. All that I'm all that I'm sharing now, these are just snippets and bits and pieces, for us to talk about the differences and the similarities, and to talk about um, the ways in which we are even different among the diaspora and yet similar in other ways, it will take so much more time. But I'm just giving you an idea based on my own exposure and my own knowledge. But it's not by any means all the information that's out there.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
important.
it's just giving you a taste. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. So now I come to my family and I, we come to Tanzania, and we realize that wow, there's some similarities. We fit right in. Um, we we're not put off by some of the challenges service, for example. Um, for example, let me give you an example. So you go to a restaurant or a government office or even just any business, and um, customer service is not usually the best. Back home, we have the same challenge. Um, but we know the standard, and employees can get in trouble for not doing a job that's uh, that's delivered with a high degree of customer service. But in Tanzania and in Ghana, the the same thing is true, except that usually people just accept the customer service lapses as a cultural thing. But in practice, we are similar in our mindset about customer service. In the United States, it's a different story. First of all, America is a very time conscious place, just like Europe is. People don't take kindly to employees being late or service delivery being slow or poor. Um, and so that's a difference. So because we are coming from the Caribbean, in our case, we have a higher level of tolerance for, you know, slow performance, you know, slow service, not so friendly service. Not that it's right, not that we like it, but we are so used to it that it doesn't put us off as much as it may put off some of our African American brothers and sisters. And so the adjustment for us is easier, but for them, it can be a challenge at times until they make the adjustment. Um, I have daughters, or my wife and I, we have daughters. We don't have any sons. And what I notice is that, and it's a thing that has been a challenge for us. It's been a turnoff for us. Um, in spite of the positives that we see in the culture in this country, this negative is an issue for us. And I don't know if those in the audience or those who may see this video in the future will agree if they are in fact in Tanzania and they have what we call girl children. We find that you could be walking down the street or you could be in a place called Kariako, the market, and a random man who can be my daughter's father, sometimes they can even be their grandfather, would just walk up to any one of my daughters, especially the youngest one, who looks even younger than she really is, and they would just grab her shoulder or grab her arm, grab her hand, look her straight in the face, and tell her that I want this one. I want you. I want to marry you. And it's not, it is not,
Why is he doing that? Why is he doing that?
you see, this is the thing, because where I'm from, you can literally be killed for doing that. You can literally lose your life for doing that one. And so in Dar es Salaam, I can't speak for all of the country, but I know in Dar es Salaam, it has gotten to the point where I have to go with them. If they go any place, I have to go with them. And it's not because they're dressed like prostitutes. No, no, please. For those who might think that, it's not because, no, they're not wearing the dress all the way down to the ground, as is the norm here, but they're not dressed in a way that would suggest that they are selling themselves. It is just a culture. When they protest, and when they protest or resist or try to tell this man, look, you don't touch me, leave me alone, women, there have been many instances, women would just laugh. Instead of saying, correct the countryman and say, hey, look, don't do that. That's not right. They would laugh. So that gives us the impression that that's the culture. You do that one in New York City, you're dead. Atlanta, you're dead. You don't, you see, that's a cultural difference. But that's here. That doesn't exist that hasn't been my experience or observation in, for example, Ghana or Liberia or what have you,
I want to
for
ask you
example.
something. I want to ask you
Hmm.
something.
Yes.
Uh, how long have you experienced this? And if you knew that such things are taking place in Tanzania, why did you choose to move to Tanzania?
Okay. So we didn't know this. We didn't know that this is the case. Um, so this is something we discovered since you've been here. And listen, I don't want to define Tanzania or define our experiences in Tanzania based on just that. We are talking about differences in culture. It's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. And maybe it's on the coast. And you see, you said earlier that you've studied the rules of YouTube and hate speech, however you define it, because it's a matter of definition, right? And matters having to do with religion can be controversial or frowned upon. But I think there is a religious component there because the same, I would say it this way, the same people who will go and grab a teenage girl, all right, and make some strong proposition, but physically touch them and essentially tell them they want them, right? You cannot do that to their daughters. You can't even talk to their wives. Treat their wives because it's considered. it's considered, I won't use a word because you'll know. So my point is there's a religious component to this thing, but they're not the only ones that do it. To a lesser degree, it is done by people who don't, who are not part of that particular religion. Different for us. We never expected that. That's something that we observed since we've been here,
So
but it's very prevalent. Somebody would, a next thing, go ahead. A next thing is that people would stare at you. You know, that's a different culture. I know that happens to some degree in Uganda, not so much Kenya, I'm told,
so
but
what kind
and
of
not so
stare
much
is that?
in the Africa. Yeah.
What
Well,
kind of
so
stare is
so
that?
so okay. This is we're talking real talk, right? You said we want to have real experiences, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So you want me to be transparent,
Yeah,
open,
be
and tell you our
transparent, be
experiences.
open. So when you say staring, I can stare at something with those
I'm
eyes
coming.
of admiring, while at the same time I can stare
No,
at something with
no,
despise,
no, no.
with
Well,
love.
maybe it's so. But you see, maybe it's so. But let me explain what happens. So my my wife and my children, um, the population, you would think that that would mean that people would notice them but not notice them. They would assume that they are, you know, Tanzanian. Way of knowing, and it's not because I'm walking with them. When my wife and when my daughters used to go out by themselves, and I wasn't around, you would tell just in color that they are like, just stare at them in the face, straight in the eye, just looking at them, no smile, no greeting, just look, like 5, 6, 7 minutes unstuck. And the only thing that will stop that is if they stare or ask them if everything is okay, and then they will turn away. So people have the ability, many people have the ability to tell that you are foreigner, regardless of. In my case, people, I don't notice people staring at me because I grew up with people staring at me. And so I got used to that. The strange thing is that we're keeping it real now. The strange thing is, and we remark among ourselves that the odd thing is that the same people who would stare at my wife and my daughters, all right, a white person, a literal European white person, we say back home, Okra. In Ghana, we say Obruni. And over here, you say Mzungu. They will walk past, their whole back exposed, their shoulders exposed, tattoo everywhere, all right? Short pants to the crotch, all right? And nobody watch them, nobody look at them, nobody notices them. It's like they're invisible. But in our case, we get scrutinized. And we've heard people say that, you know, we've had instances where one of my daughters who um, she wore a dress. It wasn't a mini skirt or anything like that, but it was a little bit tight. And a woman just walk up to her, touch the dress, and tell her she should change that dress. So that's the difference. People don't do that in West Africa. People don't do that in South Africa. They don't. But in this country, somebody will come to a stranger and try to tell them how to dress. But then the irony in the whole thing is you will see Tanzanians, young women, dressed with very tight clothing, short skirts, and nobody tell them anything. So we find that very interesting and very odd. So that's one of the differences, some of the differences. The other difference is language, and I finish with this one. Um, the Swahili language is a beautiful language. I'm learning it small, small, you know, kidogo, kidogo, kidogo kila siku, Um, it's the official language, and English is not nearly as not spoken as much in the country. I don't say that to criticize the government. I believe that a language, an indigenous language, should be the official language of every African country. Although there's no harm in learning English, um, I believe that the national language should be your own. However, if you want to interface with the rest of the world in business, English should be something you learn from the time you're a child. Now, the mistake we make, many of us diasporans, is we come to the country and we refuse to learn the language. We don't even try. We expect people to speak English in their own country, and then when they don't speak it, we get offended. When actually they should be offended. So that's another nuance. I think I want to stop at this point.
Okay, okay, sure, sure. So, you've told us about the challenges. So, what is the positive thing that you've experienced
Ah, thank
about
you.
Tanzania?
Right. First of all, Tanzanians are very welcoming, but that's an African culture.
Yes.
I mean, across the board. Um, Tanzanians are slow to speak, but they're very keen listeners, very observant. That's good. You know, we in the diaspora, we come from the western part of Africa for the most part, right? From Nigeria across, right? For the most part, and we are more expressive. We talk more. Um, some people say we are loud. All right, and but in Tanzania, people are more quiet, uh, more reserved, more composed, and that's good. However, um, because of that, sometimes we misunderstand that and misread it. But I admire that about Tanzanians. Very observant, very smart, um, uh, very good listeners. Um, Tanzania is beautiful. The land is beautiful, but that's true for most of, if not all of Africa. The cost of living in Tanzania is very
That's a
low
good one. Yeah.
compared to Ghana, compared to I think even Kenya,
Yeah,
especially in the Department of Food,
yeah. The
um,
fuel.
land,
Kenyans are leaving
and
Kenya, coming to fuel in
uh-huh.
Tanzania. Mm.
See that? Yes, exactly. So the cost of living is lower. Um, I like the fact some people are going to take issue with this, but I like the fact that Tanzania has strong controls and who can own land, and they have a strong stance on dual citizenship. I like the fact that they don't allow dual citizenship. Now you might say, well, why would a diasporan say that? How is that in our interest? How is that a good thing?
Wait,
Well,
Tanzania does
I
not
personally
allow
think
dual citizenship.
they do not allow dual citizenship.
So you
Their
either
stance on dual
so you
citizenship is
either
that, sorry, go ahead.
you let's say as an African American, you either stop being an American and be a Tanzanian, or you stop being or you don't be a Tanzanian but you retain your African American
So you
citizenship.
cannot retain your US citizenship and naturalize to be a Tanzanian citizen.
But
In other words, Tanzania
now,
does not allow that. And I agree with them.
okay, I just have a lot of questions here. You know, how are those people I watch on YouTube? How are they able to live? Because I see a lot of African Americans on, living in Tanzania, and they're having even families. They're having even farms. Right now, I'm hearing that
Have the
dual citizenship is not allowed. So how do you guys
dual
manage
citizenship
your
is not
lives?
allowed, it,
Yes.
but it doesn't mean that you can't live in the country as a resident and renew your residency every 2 years for the next how many years you want. You know, see, so I mean, if you want to be a Tanzanian, you have to give up your American citizenship. Now, if you are married to a Tanzanian and you are a woman, all right, and your husband is Tanzanian, you can in fact get your Tanzanian citizenship more easily and quicker, but you have to give up the US.
You have to?
And it's a good thing. I know that's controversial for some people. I know they get offended, right? Right. I am saying that Tanzania is pretty strong on its stance on minimizing conflict of interest due to dual citizenship. Yes, of course, of
Tanzania. Do
course.
you have
I have
friends?
Tanzanian friends. Um, of course, we have diasporan friends, but we make it a point to develop relationships, friendships with local people. You see, we cannot say we are coming home and then isolate ourselves from our family members. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Even though we have different backgrounds because of the separation, even though we have different cultural um, characteristics because of the fact that we originate from West Africa and we're more familiar with West Africa,
Yes.
uh, if you decide to live in another country than the country you grew up in, but you want to still retain everything that you left in your home country, what sense does that make? It really doesn't. So
Yeah.
most of us
Yes.
who actually decide to leave the Caribbean or the US
Yeah.
or Latin America,
Yeah.
we do so fully aware
Yes.
that we're going to have to adjust. Even if we're not fully prepared and we come with, you know, a mindset as a Western mindset, that for us to last in the continent, we have to adjust. Now, the ones who refuse to adjust or they find it too difficult, many of them return home.
Yes.
Others, many return home because the finances wouldn't allow them to live the way they would in America. Buying the products that they used to in America is much more expensive here. All right, but the people who stay, I guarantee you, they had to go through a process where they deconstruct their mind and their mentality from a Western mindset and perspective, and they began to, whether they realize it or not, to think more like and behave more like people in the culture. Okay, from a cultural standpoint,
So actually about land, I still want to ask you some more questions. Can
I'm
an
okay.
African can an African American acquire land in Tanzania?
Okay, so let me answer the question
Mm.
based on my understanding, as it was explained to me by, uh, I think they call lawyers here an advocate. Right? In back home, we say a lawyer or attorney,
Mm.
and from real estate agents and brokers
Yes. Mm.
and other people who have asked this question to.
Mm.
No individual can own land
Mm.
in Tanzania. The government essentially owns, I've been told, all the land. Some people have said that's true for Tanzania, the mainland, but not true for Zanzibar. But no person, whether African American or German or Chinese, can, as an individual, purchase land. There's no such thing called freehold title. Okay. So the government will allow you, your company, if you set up a company, for that company to purchase land. So your company can purchase land and you can build a house. The company owns the land, which is really a lease. It's not freehold. It's really a long-term lease. And you build your house, you live in your house, and you renew the lease on the land when the time of the lease expires. So Chinese are doing that, Europeans are doing that, Indians are doing that, and of course we can do that. Now, my contention, I know you're not asking me this question, but I want to answer the question and add this caveat.
It's okay.
I believe that African nations, indigenous African nations, should really rethink their policies concerning the purchase of land by foreigners. Now, I want to make one distinction and one exception.
Mm.
This is not hate speech. This is not xenophobia. Uh, this is just common sense. Land should be sold to descendants of Africans or African descendants or diaspora. I personally believe that if African countries allow non-African people, I'm not talking about people who are born outside of Africa alone. I'm talking about non-African descended people, no matter where they're born, to own land in Africa and to buy as much land as they want in Africa. In 1 or 2 more generations, you will be displaced from your motherland, from our motherland. I come from a place where, because of immigration and the fact that we didn't control it, we are now 25% of our population. A lot of people back home don't like me for this because I believe that that's wrong. I'm going to give you an example. There's one man,
Mm-hmm.
a European American guy who owns 6 million acres in this country.
6
6
million acres.
million acres. One man.
Mm.
And he's not an African.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example. And so I personally like countries African countries that that put measures in place to protect their countrymen and the country at large from being uh, becoming victims of displacement or displaced. So Tanzania has this policy. My prayer is that they would tighten it even more, and that other African countries would tighten it. I can go on and describe the nature of this problem and why it's relevant to Tanzanians, Kenyans, and diasporans and every African, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
due to the sensitivity of the
Time is
content
constrained.
on the YouTube, uh,
Exactly, exactly.
the new YouTube
Yeah,
CEO is
like I said,
the new YouTube CEO is very, very cautious and very sensitive to some things.
very what?
The new YouTube CEO is very sensitive to some things.
Of course, they all are.
Yeah. So, how do you stay connected to your African roots, to your Caribbean roots, while living in Tanzania? Do you celebrate any Caribbean uh, traditions? For example, do you practice voodoo?
Me.
Yes.
So the assumption is that voodoo is a very common practice um, and part and parcel of our culture
Mm.
as Caribbean people. It, people practice. There are people who practice it, but our family don't. Nobody in our family does. Um, and some people will say, "Oh, that's because the colonizers brought us Christianity, and colonizers brought us the quote unquote white man's religion, and we cast aside our own culture for this white Jesus and what have you."
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you that yes, the Europeans came to Africa and they went to so-called New World, including the Caribbean, and they brought a religion called Roman Catholicism, which is a what you call it, hijacked, whitewashed fabrication based on not a religion, but based on Hebrew Israelite culture, laws, traditions, and customs that you find in the Bible. They hijacked it, they repackaged it, they weaponized it, and they converted people to that.
Yes.
However, however, our culture as a people, those of us in the diaspora who are Shemites, we're Israelites, when you go back to the ancient culture, it did not involve voodoo as such.
Mm.
We adopted witchcraft and other practices that were not permitted by the Word of God, the Bible, and for that reason we were punished and scattered to the New World and elsewhere. So that topic is a subject by itself. So you have people who practice voodoo, uh, but you have many more who don't. That's not my culture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, can you share your thoughts on the current state of affairs in Tanzania and how it may be different from what you expected when you arrived?
For someone who doesn't like controversial questions and answers, you give questions that can I can easily, if I'm not careful, go too far in. Let me put it to you this way: when we came, Dr. Magufuli was alive.
Mm.
His Excellency Dr. John Pombe Magufuli. Um, hmm. Let me just say that I listen. Not me alone, my family, but many Tanzanians. And nevertheless, um, the country is developing. Positive changes are taking place under the able leadership of the current president. Um, but I believe that Dr. Magufuli instilled a sense of responsibility and lawfulness in the population, and it was a great role model for young people as a man. And I say this with all respect and sincerity because this culture doesn't esteem women the same way that women are esteemed in other cultures, even in Africa, because of perhaps religion, all right? A religion that was adopted or was actually enforced or brought to this part of Africa. I believe that people don't uh, respect enough the able leadership of the current president. So I'm saying that to say that uh, President Magufuli being a male and a very, very strong figure, even criminals feared him. And so when he passed on, we saw a difference. Government employees feared him. Ministers feared him. People said, that's not good. You're not supposed to fear a man like that. That means he's a dictator. No. It means that people understood that their actions have consequences. Let me say that one more time. People realized then that their actions, their behavior had consequences. And so they were more circumspect, they were more careful. All right? And so I think I will leave it there.
I understand why.
ah, you
All
know,
right. So let's get some questions from our audience for you.
okay.
Uh-huh.
First of all, before you ask those questions, I want
Yes.
the audience to understand, eh?
Mm.
I'm only sharing what my and our experiences have been. I'm
Mm.
not saying that my experience will be your experience.
Mm.
I'm not saying that my observations are the absolute truth. They are my reflections based on what I've experienced. Yours may be very different, but I'm happy to share my perspective.
You know, everyone has a right to their opinion.
Of course,
Yeah, everyone has their right to their opinion, and you've shared with us information that is very helpful. I didn't know about citizenship, dual citizenship in Tanzania. I didn't know about land in Tanzania. I'm learning, and imagine I'm learning from an African American, an African from the Caribbean, and myself. I'm just here in Kenya, and just we are sharing the same boundaries, and I don't know this information.
you're actually the same people before the boundaries were put, before the boundaries were placed.
We were the same
You're the
people.
same people. Yeah,
We are
yeah.
good people. So good people, kindly share your questions so that we can be able to finish the live stream. We are 1 hour on the live stream. Kindly share your questions. Now I'll have to go through the comments.
Sure.
Let me see. Okay. Okay. Apparently, we don't have questions. Uh, Kindly share your questions, brother.
Yes.
Do you see yourself in Tanzania 10 years from now?
Yes. I mean, um, again, that question
Mm.
in my case is a loaded question because I don't think you ask me what I do because what I do uh, actually
Mm-hmm.
impacts where I live and where I stay and how long I stay there. And
Yes.
so the answer is yes. I see a, a presence here, having a presence here,
Yes.
as well as in Ghana and Ethiopia because of what I do.
Mm.
So some of the time will be spent here, some of the time spent in other African countries.
Yes.
Ghana is the home base, but Tanzania and maybe soon Kenya will be other bases from which we operate.
You know, the that president of the United States who was J.F. Kennedy. You remember him?
Ah, of course I remember. Who doesn't remember him?
Some people don't. You'll be surprised. So
Really?
he once
Okay.
said that. He once said that. Don't ask what your country
Mm-hmm.
can do for you.
Good for you.
Ask
Mm-hmm.
what you can do for your country. And I really
Yes.
love that thing. Ask
Yes.
what you can do for your country. So
I believe in that too.
you say that you're seeing yourself here 10
Of course.
on.
Yes.
So would you mind to share with us
Sure.
the projects
Sure.
you are in?
Sure. And I think it's
And and
okay.
and are these projects going to benefit Africans as well?
Say the last part. I missed the last part.
Oh, so are these projects you're working on going to help Africans as well while you are doing the projects?
Okay. Wonderful. That's a wonderful question. Let me first start answering that question by saying Africa is now, and Africa is the future. If you ask me the correct way to say that, I wouldn't even use the word Africa or the name Africa. Alkebulan is now, and Alkebulan is the future. And I say that because the time has come.
Yes.
In fact, it came a long time ago, but we did not respond to the reality of the times that we are in until now. Who are we that have not responded until now? Africans that are native born and we realize that Africa's future and our future in Africa, or Alkebulan, depends on us and us alone. What am I saying? I am saying that the world knows, meaning the people outside of Africa,
Yes.
and many and most of us diasporans don't know what the world knows. They know that the future of the world depends on Africa. From their standpoint, their future depends on Africa remaining undeveloped. unindustrialized,
Yeah.
the only good for raw materials, primary source materials. All right.
Yeah.
But our future, our existence depends on us investing in the development of Africa. The problem we have in Africa and the problem we have among us diasporans is that we want non-Africans to come and develop. We're looking for foreign direct investment. That's another way of saying we're looking for Nzungu, Chinese or Asian, Indians, and Arab rich people, investors, invest in Africa.
Yeah.
The strange thing is that this has not worked and it will never work because nobody's coming to invest in an Africa that's going to empower Africans. Let me say that again. No non-African is coming.
To
I
invest.
know I'm using the word no, but almost none. You might as well say none are coming to empower Africans so that Africa is owned by Africans, that Africans are empowered and become wealthy, and Africans control every aspect of Africa's resources, its development. And we don't realize that. So we who are coming, we have to have the mindset that we are coming to build. We're not coming to just try to live our best lives. We're not coming here just to sit back and relax. And we certainly shouldn't come here with the attitude that, oh, Africa owes us something. We shouldn't stay in America or the Caribbean or Europe or wherever we are and say we're not coming to Africa until Africa meets certain standards of development. Because while we sit there thinking like that, the Chinese are coming, the Indians are coming. I see it in Tanzania, I see it in Ghana. I'm sure you see it in Kenya. Every other group, they're
Especially
coming.
Chinese.
So many. And then they come, they form societies or, I'm sorry, housing communities or real estate estates, all Chinese. You go to Posta in Tanzania, all the apartments are Indians. Try to get an apartment there. They have their ways of making sure you don't live among them. I don't want to live among people other than Africans. But my point is, they're willing to come to Africa, live among themselves, cooperate with themselves, and in the process, take over the continent. I'm not preaching hate, but I'm saying I came
It's not
with the
hate. It's
understanding
not
that
hate.
I have to help develop, I have to add value. Either that, I need to shut up and go home. Okay, so what is it that I do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a background in broadcasting. My educational background is in business administration with a concentration in finance. That's my degree, a bachelor's degree, with a minor in economics. I have 25, no, 27 years of experience in information technology, including information technology, including business management, education. I am an ordained minister, but I don't identify as a Christian because I came to the realization as to who I am.
I think we should. We, I think the part of religion, we should leave it for another day. The part of religion, we should leave it for another day.
Say that again.
Yes, I'm saying the part of religion, maybe we can discuss some other in some other interview.
Right, that's what I said. So it's not a religion.
Yes.
So what I'm doing 27 years ago, no, 25 years ago, while I was in Liberia and in Ghana, I received a calling to return back to the Caribbean. At the time, we were living in the United States, but I was doing business in Ghana. And um, I received that calling and informed my wife that we're going back home. And I told her what we're going to do. And it involved broadcasting. So we went back home and we launched a radio station. Can you hear me? Good. We launched a radio station as part of Frontline missions, right? And we operated that radio station in the US Virgin Islands in St. Croix to be exact. So that station was focused on, uh, you know, reaching young people. And it wasn't a traditional quote unquote Christian station, but it was a station that uh, had the biblical content and music, but we did talk shows, we did um, discussions, we did live events and what have you. But that was just the prelude to what I'm doing now. What I'm doing now is building a satellite network. In fact, it's already been created. Um, the satellite network is focused on Africa. The content, African. The content creators, African. Yes, some of the content will come from non-Africans, but only content that we can benefit from the standpoint of technology, from the standpoint of understanding the mind of the people who are, in their own words, detrimental to our existence. We need to know what people who are opposed to our empowerment think about us and the world. We need to understand that in order for us to know how we can overcome any obstacle they bring our way. So some of that content you will see on our platform will be from people who are not Africans. But if you listen carefully, you'll see the value of it. So this satellite network is going to launch in the first quarter of next year. It is entirely African. In fact, it's Israelite owned and operated, but we are Africans. Now, and I say Israelite, I'm not talking about Israeli, the people in Israel, or what the place they call Israel. All right. Now, we are launching on the 25th the online internet segment or component of the Abantu network. Abantu is the satellite network. It's going to broadcast programming throughout Africa and the African diaspora, meaning the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe. The programming is focused on that target audience. Anybody can watch, but we are targeting our own people. Education, information, our own news analysis, all from our own perspective. All right, with an emphasis on the biblical narrative, not Christian or religious, the pure, uncut, unedited biblical content. So the online uh, uh, platform, it's similar to YouTube, but it's not like YouTube. That one is called Ubuntu. Now I know you're a Swahili speaker. You know what Bantu is, or Abantu, know what Ubantu, everyone among the Bantu speaking language people, all the way down to South Africa, know what Abantu is and what Ubantu is. So Ubuntu is the social video sharing online platform. It's a component of a much larger project, which is Abantu, which is the satellite network. And so we will have to have studios in Tanzania. We'll have to have studios in Kenya, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, all over the indigenous African populated countries. Will be here, but we are everywhere. Now, I want to say something else about that, if I may. This is an encouragement to anyone who is watching this. You are a diasporan, whether or the UK or the United States or South America, Central America, it doesn't matter where you are, all right? Maybe you're even on the continent. Do not underrate yourself. Do not limit yourself in terms of your capacity to do things that may be beyond your financial reach. I say the same thing to our brothers and sisters on the continent, born and raised on the continent. What I find, and this is particularly true for Africans who are born and raised in the continent, there is a big, huge, gaping hole in your consciousness about your abilities. I don't think I said that right. There's a lack of confidence that really bothers me. Everybody, almost everyone I meet on the continent, is waiting for somebody from outside the continent who is not African descendant to come and invest and to change and make Africa a better place. It's not happening, it's never happened, and it will never happen. And so we hear things like, oh, we can't cut ourselves off from those people because they have technology. And the problem with that is, on the continent, many people don't know that many of the inventions that we are using that we think were invented by non-African people were actually invented by from the diaspora, even from Africa. Dr. Mensah in Ghana, he's the one who perfected the fiber optic cable. You have fiber optic internet in Kenya. You can thank him. All right. The hologram, three-dimensional hologram. All right. That technology invented by an African American woman. The automatic transmission for the car invented by an African American. I mean, there are thousands of inventions uh, done by Africans in the diaspora, and there are many of those inventions were not credited to them because there were slaves when they invented them, and their slave masters got the credit initially. We have the capacity, technologically and otherwise, to change Africa, but we have to change our mindset. Yes?
We need to change our mindsets. It's something myself I have also suffered, lack of confidence, believing that I can't do anything by myself. I need someone else. It's something that is happening to a lot of Africans because even if an African, even if you get a product, say you have a tablet like this one, and it's
Yes.
written made in Kenya, you
Yes.
go and buy. But if you have the same tablet maybe the
Yes,
same person, but it is
yes,
printed made in USA or made in UK or Japan.
right.
Africans will rush to buy that, and it's a problem.
It's true in Ghana, it's true all over.
We
Yeah,
can't believe we don't believe we can do it for ourselves, and it's so
right.
sad.
That
But
has to change.
I'm happy you've been able to bring this up and address it. At least it has come from another person's voice, and I
But
highly value this.
yes, I want to add something to that. I'm sorry for cutting off. I want to add something to that because I want somebody listening is going to be blessed by this. They're going to be encouraged and challenged by this. Maybe more people than one person.
Yeah.
Listen, I am legally blind. I was born legally blind. You know what that means? It means that I can see, but even with my glasses, I can't see well. And it's one of the characteristics of the condition I was born with that I explained to you earlier. When I was born, all right, my nervous system was damaged because of something called alcohol fetal syndrome. Usually, that syndrome will damage your brain so that you are mentally retarded. In my case, I escaped that, but it affected my nervous system. So I have tremors in my hands. And then, of course, the lack of pigment, I burn easily and what have you. What I'm trying to say is this: all of those are reasons for me to lack confidence, especially in
Yes,
a world
yes.
where I'm very different, especially as an African living among my brothers and sisters whose pigmentation is the first characteristic that defines them as African. At a young age, I had to overcome the mindset of I can't. So this is what my mother did. When I was a child, I would say I can't. I can't do this one. I can't do that. Now she was a staunch Christian, a powerful woman of God, or Yahuwah. Uh-huh. But she told me, you see that word CAN apostrophe T, that four-letter word? She said, for you and only for you, that word is worse than FU. I don't want to see the other part.
Yes, yes, yes.
Christian. She said, that word for you, Anthony, is a bad word. And so when I would say I can't do something that I clearly could do, she would discipline me. Are you understanding me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She could she was putting you in the right lane.
Aha, because she knew that if that thing took root in my mind and became the foundation of my mindset, not only would I be limited as I am in some respects, but the crippling of my mind would make me totally disabled. So let me tell you what happened. After I learned that CANT was a bad word, I developed the attitude of I can.
Mm.
Of course, I have to learn to discern between what I really can't do, because there's some things I can't, and try my best to do the things that I felt I could. And to be honest with you, I've accomplished so much
Yes.
in spite of
The
these
challenges.
disabilities and this condition.
Oh,
I taught myself to drive at 15 because my father wouldn't teach me. He was afraid. I did all kinds of stuff, and I'm doing now. So now I'm 60, soon to be 61, and this satellite network, which calls for a lot of money, I didn't have the money. I had to improvise. I had to be inventive. I had to find ways to come up with a system that's different and superior. And then I have to find and establish the right relationships so I can make up for the lack of capital. This thing about we need capital, we need capital. What we need more than anything else is a mindset of I can, and we need to get up and do.
Yeah, that's taken. Point taken. Actually, today I go to driving school and I stopped going there. So
Mm,
I've always been driving myself. So
yes.
my dad and myself, we've been going for driving. There's this highway in Kenya called Thika Road. I don't know if you've been to Thika Road. Have you been to Thika Road, sir?
No, you mean in Kenya, you say?
Yes, Kenya.
No, I haven't been to Kenya. Right.
Okay.
I've read a lot about it. I've seen videos and stuff, but it's Tanzania and other West African countries.
But I saw you
But
the
I
Swahili
plan to.
nation.
Yeah.
I saw you the Swahili nation. Is Swahili nation not a Kenyan?
No,
He ain't a
he's a,
Kenyan.
he's a, he's a Tanzanian. He's a Tanzanian.
Ah, I've been thinking he's a Kenyan.
No, he's a Tanzanian. But you are the same people. You're the same people. So you
Yeah.
don't feel bad. You're the same people. Before they put the boundaries between Kenya. Yeah, he's a Tanzanian. He lived abroad. He lived in South Korea for almost 10 years. But he's a
Yes.
Tanzanian,
Yes.
born and bred.
Oh, now it makes sense. Swahili nation.
Swahili nation. Yes.
Now it makes sense.
Yes. He's a very good brother. Very good brother. Passionate
I
and
uh,
serious.
yes. So what happens is that while I was driving, I didn't have that confidence. You know, I've
Mm.
always been told you can't drive in Thika Road. Vehicles are moving too
Mm.
fast. You know.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I took my dad and I told him, Dad, I'm going to drive. And did everything by myself. It was an automatic transmission, and so
Right.
it was
I made it
easier.
easier.
Yeah, but even if it is a manual, there is
Yes.
confidence. Confidence
Yes.
has to be there.
Has to be there.
Confidence is what places you on the road. So I just said I can do this, and I'm going to do it. He was surprised. I took them. He was
Yes.
surprised. I brought them up to the house and they were okay, you can do it. But along the way, he was telling me, this is how you do
Wonderful.
this is how you do this. So I've been doing this for quite some time now, and I believe that we are our own limitations. And
Yes.
as you said, it's good when we can discern our true limits. We should discern our true
True
limits
limits. Yes.
so that
Yes.
we don't focus on what's not right. But I didn't think riding a car
Exactly.
is my limit. No, driving a car is not my limit. It's a skill I think
Exactly.
everybody has to have. Say you have a car, will
True.
you just leave your car there and every day, it's hard. So
Exactly.
to me, confidence, I experienced it today in that way.
Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So I'm so tired, brother. Everyone is asleep here. Uh, I'm the
Ah.
only one
Okay.
awake. So maybe we will talk in another interview. And when I come to Tanzania, I'll be sure to
Okay.
meet you and to have a face-to-face interview.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Sure.
yes.
Sure. That'd be nice.
Yeah. So family, that's the end of the live stream. I told you guys if you have any questions, you should share.
Or maybe they have comments.
Yeah, they have lots of comments. I think I'll read these after
Okay.
maybe tomorrow. My eyes are very heavy right now.
Okay. Yes.
I have to rest. So goodbye, brother, and thank you so much.
Okay. Take care. And thank
Yeah,
you
you take care.
for inviting me.
Have some good sleep.
Oh no, I have to work still because of the time zone difference with the folks in the
You ain't
Caribbean.
in
Yes.
Tanzania. You ain't in
Uh, I
Tanzania?
live, I live in Tanzania, but
Yes.
the people that I interact with
Mm.
for my ministry and for business, they are in the US
Tanzania.
and they're in the
Yes.
Caribbean, and they're like 8 hours behind us. Yes.
Yes. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day then.
Okay, man. Thank you so much. Take care now.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Bye bye.